We'll talk about some steps to take to publish an effective academic paper and get it published in an international journal. This is me. My name's Gareth. I worked in the UK, I worked in the US, I worked in Ireland. It explains my strange English accent, probably to some extent. I worked in the south of England. I worked in Hungary also. Published some papers over the course of my career, as Rasha was saying. Some of them got cited, some of them didn't get cited, some of them were in good journals, some of them were in not so good journals, but the idea is that from the perspective of a writing and publishing academic, as well as from the perspective of an editor, I also work as a journal editor for a journal that is published by Taylor and Francis. It's a biology journal. We hope that we can help you in this presentation come up with some strategies for both writing and publishing your own work effectively in English, and also getting those papers published in those leading international journals. So let's get started. Let's have a think about what we're going to be discussing. And I like to call this the academic publishing wheel of fortune, the academic publishing hamster wheel. We go round and around this kind of cycle all the time as academics, from ideas, coming up with research ideas, generating funding for those research ideas, of course, very important, especially in fields like yours, biological sciences, medical sciences, health sciences, pharmacy, pharmacology, pharmacovigilance, all those kinds of subjects where a certain amount of funding is needed often to perform research. Collecting data, selecting a journal, very important step to go through. Initially, we would say, I would argue that's very important to do before you begin the writing process with your papers. Think about a target journal. That's very, very key, because of course the journal where you publish your work, one of our topics for discussion this evening, will be a place where other colleagues read your paper. Of course, readers are the most important people in academic publishing, because of course those are the people who are going to cite your work. If you don't publish in a good journal, nobody's going to find your work. If you don't think about how you're going to pitch your work to journals and accumulate readers, accumulate citations, then of course your work will languish and nobody's going to get to see it. So journal selection is very important. Paper writing also, we're here to help with that at Research Square Company. We provide lots of services through our professional services division. It's called American Journal Experts, aje.com. You can have a look at that if you're interested, for editing services, submission, and then peer review and publication. And we do provide lots of training, lots of webinars, lots of other content in these areas to help colleagues around the world be as effective as possible at the different stages of the publication cycle. Now, we've all received emails like this in the past. Many thanks for asking whether we would like to publish your paper. Your paper is good and original, but unfortunately we are simply unwilling to publish it because the good bits were not original and the original bits were not good. Everybody gets rejected by international journals with their great research all of the time. Why does that happen? And how can we enhance your chances of effectively getting your work published in the best leading journals? Now, we talk to publishers all the time. We work with hundreds of papers all of the time, thousands of papers every month, editing them, helping authors steer those papers into international journals. Excellent research is being done, of course. You're doing great research. You wouldn't be in the positions that you're in at your universities doing your research, doing your PhDs, your master's degrees, if you weren't doing great research. But international publishers often don't want to publish our research. And some of the reasons for this are shown here on this slide. Papers submitted outside of the journal's scope. Very important to check your journal aims and scope before making a submission, before writing your study. That's one of the reasons why it's important to target your work to a journal before you begin the writing process. Thinking about plagiarism, incorrect formatting, reviewer responses, managing your responses to peer review, and the potential for not recycling your submissions. But the number one reason for international article rejection at leading journals is issues with the English. And of course, so that's one of the reasons why we're presenting this workshop this evening. We're thinking about ways in which you can enhance your English writing and communication skills to ensure that your readers, your editors, people who engage with your academic work find it to be interesting, find it to be engaging, find it to be something that they want to read, something that they want to send out for peer review, and something that they want to put into their journal. So targeting your work to international journals is very, very important as a starting point. So you do your work, you think about the key takeaway from that piece of research, you then think about which journal you're going to send it to, and you think about your English writing and communication skills. English, of course, is the international universal language for scientific communication. Unfortunately or fortunately, often academic papers need to be well written to a higher standard often of English than you might see in other fields, in other areas, for example. And the writing process, understanding and developing your writing skills as a researcher can be hugely beneficial. But you're not born with effective communication skills. You don't just, have effective communication skills. You can train yourself to be more effective at writing and publishing. You can take training courses, you can get help, you can listen to the mistakes that other authors have made in the past. You can think about how you can more effectively communicate your research to international journals. And you can ask yourself, how do you feel when faced with a difficult writing task? How do you start the writing process? Do you carefully construct a plan beforehand, or do you just start writing and think about the process as you go along? Because if you're not like Arnold, the bricklayer here, you should have a plan in place before you begin your writing process. So what have we talked about so far? Before writing an article for submission to an international journal, you need some results. Of course, you need a message. You need to know what's important about your results that a journal, the readers of that journal, the editor of that journal is going to be interested in. Results, a message. You need something that will get that journal interested in your paper, a message. You need a journal. You need to think about your audience. Who's going to be reading your paper? Who's going to be picking up the journal, downloading the article, and reading the paper? So message, audience, the journal that you select, and the structure of your writing. Message, audience, and structure are three things to have in mind before you begin the writing process. I recommend that you have these three things in mind before beginning your writing in your next academic article, for your next academic paper. What's the message? What's the thing that you want people reading that piece of work to take away from that experience? Which journal are you targeting, and what will the structure of the writing be? Message, audience, and structure. If you forget everything else that we talk about this evening, I would beg you, plead with you to please try to remember those three items, those three issues to have in mind before beginning your writing process. And of course, effective English language communication skills in your writing are very helpful, very useful as well. Plain English. Lots of people think that the more complicated they are in their academic writing, the more intelligent they're going to look. People often say to us, using long words in my academic articles makes me look good as a researcher. No, have a look at this article title, The Problems with Using Long Words Needlessly. Commentators, trainers, academic writers have identified 6 features of good, plain English. Short sentences, no unnecessary words, familiar words, active rather than passive voice in your writing, appropriate style, and good punctuation. Your readers are probably not going to be native speakers. Most of the people who read and engage and indeed write international academic articles these days are not native English speakers. So when people pick up your article and engage with it, you need to make sure that they can retain that information. As Einstein is thought to have said, the definition of genius is taking the complex and making it simple. Write clearly and simply to be accessible to readers in other languages and for whom English is not their first language. So people ask us, won't using simple language in my writing make me appear less intelligent? Not at all. The majority of your academic papers are read by non-native speakers. It's important to be simple and direct, quite different actually to the way that you might write in other languages if you were putting together an academic article in, for example, French, where you're actually taught to be complicated, long words, be as confusing as possible. Not the case with our English writing. Excuse me, I slipped ahead a couple of slides. We will then talk now about preparation. So message, audience, your journal, your target journal, and the structure of your writing. You're all pharmacists, pharmacy students, biomedical researchers, health scientists. So you'll be familiar with the structure of an academic article based around that famous IMRAD academic article structure: the introduction, methods, results, and discussion. Your structure. Message, what's the key takeaway from the research? What's the one thing or two things or three things that you want people to remember from reading your paper? Keeping it simple is always better. One message is better than 3 or 5 or 10. And your audience, your target journal, and the structure. And don't forget that your title, your abstract, and your keywords, very important because they perform a different function than the rest of the article. Most people don't read more than the title and the abstract of academic papers. You can ask yourself this question: when was the last time you read more than just a title and an abstract of an academic paper? The title and abstract are selling the paper to the editor, to the readers, to the reviewers. They're also used for search engine optimization, for people to find the article when they search online for work in your field. So they've got to be useful for indexing. They've got to be informative, attractive, and effective. They perform quite a different function to the rest of the IMRAD structure: the introduction, the methods, results, and discussion. So a lot of people don't put much time into the title and into the abstract. That's a mistake. You should put time and energy into your title and into your abstract. Why is that? Well, these are often the only parts of your paper that someone else is going to read. Also, when editors get your papers in submission to their journals, they look at the title, the abstract, and the cover letter and make a decision about whether or not to send that paper out for peer review. So, what makes a good title? It has to have the fewest possible words, adequately describe the contents of your paper, and keep it short. Identify the main issue, the subject, be accurate, unambiguous, specific, and complete. Note infrequently used abbreviations. Attract people's attention, allure them, entice them, get them interested in reading your work. Lots of papers have what we like to call declarative titles, where they tell the reader what the answer is to a particular question. This new drug is the cure for cancer would be a declarative title. We also have non-declarative titles. For example, new therapies, new drug therapies provide a step forward in the cure for cancer. That's telling you what's going to happen in the paper, but not telling you the answer. Declarative titles tell you the answer. Most health science journals, most medical sciences journals don't want authors to use those kinds of titles. Why? Because we want our medical practitioners, our doctors, our researchers working on public health to read more than just the title of a paper before applying that particular treatment. So in your field, most journals will be looking for non-declarative titles, or what we call interrogative or interrogative titles, where you ask a question with your article title. So have a think about that. Your title should be short. Studies have shown in medical sciences, article titles less than 7 words get more citations. Certainly your title should not be longer than 20 words in length. Want to get more citations? Keep your title as short as possible. Compelling, concise, and informative. The most important words related to the topic, keywords in the title, entice the reader. Don't give away the punchline. You don't want a declarative title. In medical sciences, in health sciences, we want our doctors to read more than just the title before starting to prescribe us drugs or cut us open or something like that. Don't be over sensational. And of course, you may need to include some information on your study design in your title, but put effort and energy into this. Edit, 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 share with your co-authors, spend time coming up with the best title, the most effective title that gets your message across, depending upon your target journal. And this is another reason why it's so important to have a target journal in mind before you begin that writing process. You can reach out to editors. You've got your results, you've got your message. Why not write to editors and ask them in pre-submission inquiries, would you be interested in considering this study for submission to your journal? There's nothing to stop you doing that. You can write pre-submission inquiries to 10 journals, 15 journals. We can give you a template. I can give you an email template at the end of the presentation. Get in touch with editors, write them emails, say, I've finished this piece of work. Would it be suitable for submission to your journal? They might say, no, but we've got another journal that we'd recommend. Or they might say, yes, please submit your paper to our journal. We'll send it out for peer review. And that's good because you've already gotten yourself in the mind of the editor. You've already speeded up the process of getting your paper towards eventual publication. So titles, what about abstracts? Very hard to write, 200 words, 250 words, 300 words. Always imagine that you're writing an abstract for a conference presentation. Always imagine that this is the only thing that other people are going to get to read from your work, because often it will be all that people read. Put the effort in to a good abstract. It's got to be honest and precise. Stand alone for search engines. Sometimes it's all people read, no technical jargon, short and specific. Most journals, especially in the health sciences, don't want you to cite any references. And above all, the quality of your abstract will inform your editor's decision as to what to do with your paper. As you know, higher impact factor journals have high rejection rates. Editors will be deciding at the desk stage whether or not to send your paper out for further peer review. Many journals base their decisions on the abstract alone. And of course, sadly, many authors write the abstract in a rush, almost as an afterthought. This has to be concise, a standalone piece of writing with a very clear message, accurately reflecting the full text of the paper. If you struggle with writing an abstract for a paper, here's the 4-question-based technique that you can use to effectively write an abstract. Write down these questions and then answer them with information from your own article, and then delete the questions. Why did you do the study? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? Why did you do the study? That's the aims. What did you do? That's the methods. What did you find? The results, of course. And what did you conclude? The discussion and significance. We do this in workshops all the time. Get people to answer these questions from their own research, put in the answers, delete the questions. You end up with 100 or 150 words from your own study that you can use as the basis for your next abstract. Of course, it is a structured abstract. As many journals will be asking you to write anyway, a structured abstract can help you to organize your ideas. So you should do this anyway, even if your journal is not asking you for a structured abstract. Put one in, do this in sequence, and then delete the structure, delete the questions. You'll end up with a good chunk of information that you can then edit for your abstract, for your paper. Effort into this is very important. If you look at articles in leading international journals, you will see that this structure is there in the abstract. Editors working for nature journals, for example, are trained to put this structure into abstracts. So you can go with a coloring pen, with a marker pen, and come back with the answers to those 4 questions in the structure of the abstract easily. And you can have a look at examples from your own subject area, from your own field. You will find those 4 questions answered in sequence in the abstract. Why did you do the study? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? It works really well, and I recommend putting effort and time into the abstract, into the title, so that editors will look at your study and think, this is great, really interesting. I'm going to send this out for peer review. And when you go to high impact factor journals, your Natures, your Science, 9 out of 10 papers get rejected before getting sent out for peer review. So your first goal as a submitting author is to ensure that your paper is one of that 10% or 15% or 5% that actually does get sent out for peer review. How do you do that? Well, thinking about your message, your audience, your target journal, and your structure before you begin the writing process. Like a story, like a movie, like a detective book, structure is the most important element. Readers need to know where they've come from, where they are now, and where they're going in your article. It's like writing a story. A plot is needed. We will now talk a little bit about how to do this in the remainder of your article, in the IMRAD section of your academic paper. What does IMRAD stand for? It stands for Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. 99% of papers in your field going to international journals will have this structure. Primary research articles addressing an issue, addressing a question. You could choose to pose that question as the title of your article. That's an interrogative title. You could choose to suggest to the reader what the study is going to be doing. That's a non-declarative title, talking about what you're going to be doing, bringing it out into the article, starting off in the introduction. What are you going to need to do? Start broad. Start broad. Don't begin with the nitty-gritty details of your study. People will switch off. They won't be interested in reading about your particular nitty-gritty, precise details of your research immediately at the top of the paper. Bring the reader in. Draw them into the crucial issue that your paper addresses, keeping it broad, telling the reader why your work is important in a bigger picture scale. Why is your work important for public health, for public safety? What question are you addressing that lots and lots of people are going to be interested in reading about? And get more specific as you come down through the introduction. Keep it short, 2 or 3 paragraphs in an effective, well-written academic article introduction is sufficient. You don't want a literature review. You do not want that in a primary piece of research writing. Nobody wants to read about all the papers that you collected over the course of your PhD research question investigation. About 1,500 to 2,000 words is sufficient for an academic article introduction, keeping in mind that the average length of an academic paper published across the industry, across academic publishing, it's about 5,000 to 6,000 words on average. That's the average length of a primary piece of research writing, a primary research paper. So you've got to balance your IMRAD structure. You've got to balance your article. About 1,500 words is sufficient for your introduction, with an opening sentence that takes the reader straight to the issue. Get the most important details in there about the issue, a brief summary of the question and the best evidence, and ending with a crisp and clear research question at the end, keeping within the rules of good writing, as we talked about before, active rather than passive voice where possible in your writing. And I recommend this template for writing an effective introduction. State the question at the beginning, talk about the state of the art in the second section, give the reader literature, recent pieces of primary literature, that recent review papers that give the reader that setup for the question that you plan to address, and then finish your introduction by stating what you're going to do. You'll see in Nature and Science papers, this is what writers do. They say in the third paragraph of the introduction, here we show, this study shows. So keep it broad to start with, pose a general question that lots of people are going to be interested in, then tell the reader what you're going to be doing at the end of your introduction. Linking it together brings you into the methods section. Very important, like a sequence of events, a timeline. A methods section, when well written and structured, takes the reader through the sequence of events that you went through in your study. What you did first, what you did second, what you did third, and what you did last. Data collection followed by data analysis in sequence. It's like a timeline sequence of events. And by the way, the only part of your paper predominantly written in the past tense, because of course your reader is reading the paper, they're experiencing the paper, they're looking back on what you did in the study in the past. So the methods section predominantly talks about what was done in the past in a timeline sequence of events. Got to get all the methodological details in there so that somebody else can repeat the study. The number one reason why papers get rejected in peer review is due to perceived or real problems in the methods section. So show this to your colleagues, show it to your co-authors, your other academics, your professors, people in your university. Ask them, is there enough information in this method section for somebody else to be able to repeat my study? Because if there's not, you're probably going to have problems in the peer review process. It's extremely common for editors to reject papers if they feel that the wrong method has been used or that incomplete information has been provided in the method section. So you must give enough detail so a qualified reader can repeat your study. If your method section similarly is thin on details, editors are going to think that you're hiding something. So again, you've got to bulletproof it, waterproof it, make sure that there's enough information in there for somebody else to understand what you did. And of course, you can put a lot of that into data supplements. You can put a lot of that online. We'll talk about this in the Q&A if you have questions about what methods to include, but in particular, statistics as well. Are you sure that your statistics are correct? Your timeline sequence, data collection, data analysis will be based upon subheadings. And by the way, very often, the results section, academic articles, use the same structure overall as the methods section. Readers expect that. They expect to see the same sequence of events, the same sequence of information in the results section as has already been discussed in the methods. Great way to get started with your results: figures, tables, pictures. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Often people begin the writing of their academic papers in the results section. That's what you do first. You collect your data, you analyze it, you've got a picture, a table, a figure, table of data. You can then describe that table, that picture, that figure in your results section. And the trick here is learning what information to include and what not to include. But it's the facts and just the facts, no interpretation. That comes later, often based around the same sequence of events as previously presented in the methods section. So things happen in the methods section and the results section in the same sequence. You've got your structure. That's why structure is so important. Targeting your journal, picking a target journal before you begin writing will show you what sections to include and how much information, how much detail to include as well. Basing your results, though, very important to base your results if you struggle around figures and tables. And as I mentioned, this is often the first part of academic paper writing that people do. Now, of course, the discussion, and you're free here to interpret and talk about what your results may mean, but start off specific. In the introduction, you go broad, like a pyramid upside down. In the discussion section, you start specific, like a pyramid the right way up. Tell your readers at the beginning of the discussion what the answer is to the question that your paper seeks to address. Tell them in the first sentence of the discussion, this study has shown that this drug is an effective treatment for cancer. Tell them the answer to the question that your paper seeks to address, and then build out from that specific information in the discussion. Interpret your results. Relate your discussion back to the objectives and questions you raised at the beginning in the introduction. Limiting your conclusions to what your data can actually support, of course. Lots of papers get rejected because authors try to do too much with their data. And don't forget to suggest future directions for research, new methods, explanations for previously published results. If you don't do that, and somebody reads your paper and thinks of a new idea, they don't have to cite you. So put your thoughts, suggestions for new directions, new ideas that you might have, put them in the discussion so that other people have to cite you. They won't have the opportunity to come up with ideas from your work and not cite you. Put your ideas, suggestions for future work into that base of the discussion pyramid. We don't want an expansive essay that extrapolates wildly all over the place. Start your discussion with a single sentence that tells the reader your main findings. Don't forget to report your negative results. Don't forget to report your strengths and your weaknesses. These things show peer reviewers that you're on top of the field, that you know what you're doing, that your study is robust. So relate your study to what's already been found. Discuss what your study means and talk about any unanswered questions that your study may raise. Relate, discuss, and bring up those unanswered questions. And again, the shape of this often, in terms of subheadings, follows the sequence of events that you already introduced in the method section and in your results. So here's your general structure of an academic article. Don't forget about the title, the authors, the abstract and keyword performing a specific function in academic writing. The rest of the paper, that's the information. Your IMRAD structure, I've given you a quick template for writing your introduction. 3 sections, not more than about 1,500 words. In the method section, a sequence of events, a timeline of what you did, data collection and data analysis. In the results, start off with figures, pictures, tables of data, and then describe them to your readers. Main outcomes. No interpretation, just the facts in the results. And then in the discussion, that pyramid the right way up, tell the reader at the beginning what the outcome is, what the answer to the question is, and then build out into your interpretation at the end. This is the general structure of an academic paper. We are a Research Square company. I'll give you a quick overview of who we are. Founded in 2004, helped more than 2.5 million authors in 192 countries through our preprint survey. If you don't know what that is, I'm happy to talk about that in a moment. And we do provide lots of training. If you've enjoyed this and you'd like me to come back and do more, please do get in touch. I'd love that. Also, we provide editing services, other professional services for authors around the world. We work with a range of publishing companies, most notably Springer Nature. We are the preferred editing service for all of the Springer Nature portfolio, BMC family of journals. But that's not all. Sage, Cambridge University Press, Wiley, Elsevier, and the list goes on. My name's Gareth. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation today. And now, of course, we have time for any questions or comments or thoughts. Thank you so much for your kind attention.